Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We still might have some people rolling in, but we're going to get started since it is a little bit past 1. Welcome to today's virtual mind walk. Thank you so much for attending today. My name is Chrissy, and I am the event coordinator intern at CSPA. We have a great presentation ready for you, and thank you, Kelsey, for being here. Before we begin, I'm going to dive into what a mind walk is and introduce our speaker. Mind Walks are a lecture series hosted by the California State Parks and the Central Coast State Parks Association. They are hosted every month and alternate between in-person and virtual offerings. You can check out the list of upcoming lectures and archives of past recordings on our website. The Mind Walks program is underwritten by the Thomas E. and Mary Catherine Ellsroth Fund and supported by our partners here at the Central Coast State Parks Association. CSPA is a nonprofit that funds and supports educational programs in state parks of San Luis Obispo County. They help fund anything from new museum exhibits, school group transportation, or guided educational activities like the Mind Walk series. If you'd like to support the Mind Walk program or other state park educational opportunities, please check out our website and you can learn more about how to donate to these programs and receive some perks. Today's presentation will last roughly 30 to 45 minutes with time at the end for questions. To ask our presenter questions, you can use the chat box or the Q&A at the bottom, but we won't get to them until the end unless the speaker says otherwise. All right, I'm going to introduce Kelsey Schaefer real quick. She is a dedicated advocate for Indigenous rights and cultural preservation, currently serving as the secretary of the YTT Northern Chumash Tribe, with a deep-rooted connection to her heritage and a passion for community empowerment. Kelsey plays a vital role in tribal governance and outreach efforts of YTT. Thank you, Kelsey. I'm gonna type that into the queue just because we had a lawnmower in the back right as I introduced you, but you can go ahead and give your presentation. Thank you so much, everyone.
Chrissy, thank you very much. Hachu, everyone. My name is Kelsey. Micha Kalesi, Wamita Anatilhini. Ki istu titu titu, yak tilhini, watsapatu, watsakawa. Hello, my name is Kelsey Schaefer, and I am a member of Yak Titu Titu Yak Tilhini Chumash Tribe. We are good people that come from the San Luis Obispo County area. My family in particular belongs to the lands and the waters of Avila Beach. In our language, that village is called Sapatu, which is the place of the whales. And folks around here, if we're familiar with the place, we know Avila is a place of whales, one of the best places to view whales on their migration patterns. And so our family, that's one of the villages that our family and grandmothers come from on my line. And it's a pleasure to be here to talk about our role and our responsibility to our homeland. So I'd like to share a presentation with y'all. So today we are going to focus our talks about good fire in our homeland. In our language, we would say good fire as chutana, chutana. And before we get into that, though, I'd just like to give you a little bit of history as to who we are in our homeland and who we are as the people with a responsibility. So we are Yak Titu Titu Yak Tilhini. Our tribe name and what we call ourselves, Yak Titu Titu Yak Tilhini, it translates to the people of Tilhini. Tahini itself, it translates to the place of the full moon. Its place is in San Luis Obispo as a city, but also our entire homeland as a whole, with all of our villages and different place names combined. Tahini, the place of the full moon. I love looking at language and dissecting it and revitalizing it. Tilhini, its translation, it is like to be full, like a full moon or like a full tide. And there's so much depth and meaning behind this name of Tilhini, besides not just a full moon. It is a place to be full. And that doesn't just talk about, oh, it's a full moon tonight or it's a high tide now. It speaks to a time and place, a very specific time in a year, in a season, in a month. And so I just wanted to kind of explain that who we come from and how we are recognized, how we are called by ourselves, but by other tribes of Tilhini people. Tilhini, we are from a place that is full. There's a lot behind that. Our homeland is traditionally from the south. We start at the Santa Maria River. Now, I know a lot of us, as we were raised and going through public education, we are taught that Chumash Nation is one whole nation, one whole group, where in fact they're actually a group of various nations and groups with their own languages, their own homelands, their own protocols, their own governance, with a sovereign identity that are related to each other. Our languages are different in the way that Spanish, Italian, French are different. They're from the same family, but they are independent of each other and have their own shapes and their own identity. And so here on this screen, you can kind of see kind of a summary of what all of the Chumash groups' homelands are down south to Malibu. And then we call ourselves a Northern Chumash group because of all of the different Chumash groups. There's roughly 7 to 8 documented languages. We are the northernmost group. Ethnologists, and archivists in the past had named us Obispeño Chumash in relation to San Luis Obispo County and the San Luis Obispo Mission, because this is the place that we belong to and the place that we come from. And so we call ourselves YTT Yaktilhini, a Northern Chumash Tribe of San Luis Obispo County and region. On the north end of our homeland, we go up to Ragged Point on the coast and inland along Nacimiento River. We extend east out to Carrizo Plains, including the Caliente Range, and then out west beyond the ocean, in some parts, miles out into the ocean. So that's in general the homeland that we are responsible to, the homeland and the ocean and the waters that claim us as a people. And that's really what kind of defines our identity and our roles and our responsibilities as stewards of this land and of this world here in Tahini. And so that's really important for who we are and our identity. So today we came to talk about good fire. One of our relationships that we have with the land, and a relationship that we have had for thousands and thousands of years, is with fire, and what fire's role and responsibility is to the land as well. Building this relationship with fire has been instilled for thousands of years and practiced for thousands of years until recently. And good fire, we need to define what does that mean before we can talk about it. A lot of people have different, I suppose you could say, relationships with fire, impressions of fire, histories, some more traumatic than others, right? We've all, in California, we have seen fires be very destructive on humanity. But good fire, what does good fire mean? And what are some examples of what good fire looks like? If we go back in time and we look at our traditional relationship with fire and where it begins with humankind, fire is safety. Fire is cooking, a means of cooking your food. Fire is a means of building and crafting tools that we need. Fire is a means of clearing brush so that we could get to our gathering places. Fire is a means of fuels management and land management in a way that promotes growth of specific plants that are desirable, or to promote habitat of animals that are either hunted, or create a healthy environment for the world around it. Good fire, what does that mean? something that we've talked about, and I have to quote our cousin Becca. She would have been here with me today. She was unavailable, but Becca, she had said something that is, I think, really powerful. Good fire is fire on purpose for a purpose. It is fire with intent. And so that's what we want to talk about. In California, it's a biodiversity hotspot, right? We have thousands of years of intentional cultivation between all of the different indigenous tribes and groups that lived in California. And in California, there's this idea, especially at early contact and when Spaniards were first coming to California, and discovering it, right? Quote unquote, discovering it for the first time. There's this idea of natural landscape. There's this idea of things were this way naturally. And while there are a lot of natural elements to California, of course, we have soil, we have air, we have climate, we have water. There's a lot of intentional cultivation that has been established for thousands of years in California. And these are some of the things that we can see. Fire is and has been one of the most effective land management tools in California. A lot of what we see today is from intentional management. So with California, there's this quote that has been pulled from Tending the Wild, that I want to read and share with you all. Had California been devoid of human habitation during the Holocene, the vegetation in many places, its structure, its composition, extent, and distribution would appear quite different today. Desert fan palms would not be growing in many, perhaps all of the Sonora desert canyons, where they now form a green oasis. In some areas where the valley grasslands exist today, there would have been forest, woodland, or chaparral. Many of the rain-fed montane meadows would have long since vanished, engulfed by montane forests. In some oak savannas, there would be fewer enormous valley oaks, and lower montane forests of the Sierra would boast fewer towering sugar pines. The ranges of some animals would be different too. For example, the island foxes would be absent from the southern Channel Islands. In short, many of the natural features of the present day California landscape are not, strictly speaking, natural, but are rather a part of a product of a deliberate human action. And this is from M. Pat Anderson's Tending the Wild. Tending the Wild is a really wonderful resource if folks are interested in land management in California specifically. But we want to bring this up because of that idea of it's all naturally occurring, and examples of how this land management has changed since colonization is seen everywhere. One example we have is here of Yosemite, iconic location in California. This is a photo, a recent photo. This is what it looks like over the last few years, maybe not now after the fires. But you can see that there is a dense, a robust forest floor. Look at that. It is beautiful. It is green. It is lush. This is not how it looked for thousands of years. This photo, thank you, Getty Images. This photo is from the 1800s. This is from a time when the Southern Sierra Miwok were intentionally managing these lands as stewards for thousands of years. You can see how different it looks, the slopes, the trees, the floor. Frequent burning was a management tool of this area. You can notice that there's more spaces between the trees as part of what the Miwok did and how they took care of this area. It doesn't look like this anymore. And recently we had a big fire come through in the last couple of years. And we do not have the same forest management that has protected this area for thousands of years in the past. This is another photo from the 1800s, and you can see how different it looks. So California is fit for fire. Many say that California is fire adapted. It's a fire adapted ecosystem with fire adapted species. But we feel like it's really important to talk about, what does that mean, fire adaptation, and what kind of fire? Because cultural fire and prescribed burns or cultural burns are very different. So when we say California is fit for fire, it's fit for good fire. It's adapted and requires good fire, not just any fire. So the California, with its diversity, it wants intentional fire that, for us, cultural fire, it has a lower intensity with a lower heat. Some plant populations, they need fire more frequently than others. The good fire is going to help different plant communities to reseed, or in some cases, like the pines, the pine cone actually needs the resin to melt in order for those pine nuts to come out of the pine cone on their own. These plant communities here, we have the coastal sage scrub, we have chaparrals, we have pine forest here. These are all plant communities in their own ways that have a relationship with good fire and require good fire. And they require good fire in different ways depending on what they are, and what kind of plant they are. So Calscape here in San Luis actually has a Fire Followers campaign. This is a campaign that you can sign up and get pictures and see and watch what is happening with plants with and without fire. The term fire followers is typically associated with chaparral plants. However, there are many others that require and rely on fire to remain healthy and be healthy for the future. Many of the plants need fire to grow, just to regrow and resprout. Others, and a smaller few, they come and they grow only after fire. They actually require fire in order to have any growth at all. Some other plant communities, fire helps them with their own plant health and their regrowth, because either the space around them has been cleared so they have room to grow, and for their roots to spread out. And so this is a really great resource for those that are interested in following plants to find out and understand their relationship with fire, what they need from fire, and what kind of fire that they need. So some of the reasons and things that we can talk about with good fire in land management: we've said good fire is one of the most effective land management tools. Most of the time, we hear about land management and prescribed burns and controlled burns for fuel management. That's very popular in California, especially in unruly areas, where wildfires are of a great risk. Fuel management is, of course, absolutely important. But for us, we use fire for many other reasons. One of the reasons would be for shaping our landscape for hunting areas, and enhancing the habitat we need for the animals. An example of this for hunting, say if we're hunting deer, deer prefers to chew on, they love new shoots. And so you might burn an area and those new shoots and the new growth will attract the type of game and the deer that we would rely on or that we're hunting. This goes the same for our plant communities. Plants, man, for us, they're so diverse. They serve so many purposes, and they are such an important part of our life and our identity, and everyday activities, truly. Plants, they're used, obviously, we have plants for food, we have plants for medicine, we use plants for construction, whether that be for traditional housing. We call our homes kinipus, and they are made with a willow structure, willow branches, and they are filled in with tule bundles. And so that is the structure of our homes. We use plants for creating our musical instruments with the elderberry trees. We use plants for creating canoes, our tule canoes. And so there's so many uses of the plant, and depending on what we're wanting, what part of the plant we're wanting. In some cases, it might be the roots, it might be the stems, it might be the leaves, it might be the thorns, it might be the flowers, the pollen, the nuts, the fruit. That'll change what our relationship is and how we are managing and taking care of the land for that plant community, and what our fire will look like, the different times of the year that that fire will need to be taking place. These are all dependent on the plant community that we're in. And we know here on the Central Coast, we have a very, very diverse ecosystems here and biomes. And so there's so many different areas that require a different, slightly different touch to them. And that's really important to know. So good fire. We don't just have reasons for the environment for good fire, but we also have some societal reasons, some social needs for fire. For ourselves, we talk about habitat for others and enhancing habitat for the plants and for the animals, but we also need to create space for ourselves and clearing spaces for living, for building homes. This is something we have to do now in California as community, as our population grows. This is something that we're always looking at. And what does our place here, what does our home in our community that we're building look like? And how do we want that landscape to look like? And we need to make sure that it is cleared for us. For communication across different distances. This is especially important as a group that is somewhat more isolated from the other Chumash groups. Our closest kinships pre-contact are the Yokut to the east and also the Salinan to the north. And so communication is very important. Also increasing quality and quantity of our plant materials, whether it be for basket weaving, for building, for medicine, increasing the health and the quality is so important to have a healthy environment around you, as well as uses for ceremonial rituals and things like that. Now, on another note, is not on the physical realm here of what we can all visualize, something that we talk about with fire, something that I think about with fire is what we have inside of us. We kind of talk about you always need to have fire at the table. You need to follow where the fire goes, and you need to work with the people where the fire is. If people have fire in their belly with what they're doing, it's talking about that passion and that commitment, that responsibility, identity. There's another meaning to fire than just the physical aspect of fire, and the protection that fire comes with, but there is a purpose and a fire inside all of us. And that is something that, you can kind of see with each other. And it's so important when we get together with groups, the things that you need to have. You need to have fire, you need to have food, you need to have songs and gifts for each other. Those are the essentials. And water, of course. And so that's something that fire is not just an element of the physical realm. And that is a cultural aspect of fire, a societal need and drive, and a burn for fire. So burning on the Central Coast, burning in Tilhini, fire as an identity, as a way to define us, is actually one of the ways that early on the Spanish ships discovered people here on our coast, is because they saw Tilhini people with their fires and they knew there's people there. This is occupied, this is space, there are resources here to sustain these people. And seeing the burns on the land, we are managing our land with cultural burns and seeing the smoke from the ships. And so that attracted Spanish to us. Some of the important food crops that are managed with fire, one of the first ones I can think of is chia. Chia is a frequent fire follower. Many people may associate chia down south, central and southern Mexico, but chia is actually native to right here on the central coast. It is native to us, and this is a traditional food and a traditional medicine for our people that is very important. Tarweed is another fire follower. And of course, our beautiful coast live oaks that we have here. Oak is everything about fire. It's a hardwood. It has fire resistant bark. It sprouts. It likes to have more direct sun in order to grow healthy. And so oaks, they need fire. They want the area around them to be cleared. They want space between them so that their sprouts can grow and become trees as well. And so it's very important. And as many people know, with oaks and acorns, acorns are a staple food for many Indigenous people, and it's no different for us. They are a staple food for our people. And so being able to have a healthy population of our oaks is crucial. It is absolutely vital to our society and to our communities here. And creating a space around the oaks, not only is that good for them and for the seedlings to sprout up, but it's also good for us to access these areas. When gathering, you want to be able to safely access your gathering areas. Tall grasses or unruly brushes, that's not safe. We don't want to get bit by snakes or have ticks infest us. We're no different today than we were then, and we need to have safe access to our gathering spaces. So that's very important. So this leads us to California and recent changes, things we have seen, especially with policy. Um, 2020, let's go back a few years. This was a really big year for everyone around the world for many, many reasons. It was a really big year for policy writing. But we want to talk about the policy and the focus of fire. 2020 was a record year of wildfires for California in recent history. 4.3 million acres were unintentionally burned in 2020. I think it was said to be the worst year prior to 2020. This is especially because of the types of fires that we experience, the type of devastation and destruction to people's homes and communities. It was absolutely devastating, and it's hard to forget. And politicians and lawmakers said this is something we need to do, something to fix this, something to better manage our forests and our fire fuels. And so a couple of policies were written into place. Two of the big ones are SB 332 and AB 642. These policies defined cultural burns on a government level, and they established a process and a recognition for the need of cultural fire, cultural burns, and cleared a way to establish cultural fire practitioners from an Indigenous person to bring in our traditional ecological knowledge and traditional practices where it comes with fire to manage this land so that we don't see that kind of devastation again. That is something that is heartbreaking, and it creates a bad relationship for people with fire. These are things that we don't want to see from fire. And so these policies that are taking effect, they help us bring our practices and a different type of fire to land management in a way that we don't have to go through the same processes and the same hurdles as, say, a prescribed fire does, so that these benefits from having a different type of fire can be met. We set the floor for this need to do more for our land and to do more, to be more responsible. And cultural fires is one of the ways that we can do this, that we are bringing to the table, and that we are able to now partner with government agencies in order to do this for our community in San Luis Obispo, on the Central Coast, in California, and everywhere that needs more support with this land management is what our hopes are. So we need to be grounded in cultural fire. This is something that we need to root. We need to get this rooted back into our community. And with these new policies in line, this is something that we are working on within our community in San Luis Obispo. Working with San Luis and with CAL FIRE to bring good fire back to San Luis Obispo. You know, it's interesting. When we think about the number in 2020, 4.3 million acres were unintentionally burned and caused devastation. Pre-contact, when Indigenous peoples were managing the land with good fire, 5 to 13 million acres were burned in a year. Think about that. 5 to 13 million acres were burned. This is more than how many acres were unintentionally burned in 2020. But the difference is important. The difference is the type of fire that burned on our lands. Cultural fire is not as intense. It is lower heat, and it is not to the same spread. It is not to the same scale as to what we saw and what we have seen in recent years. And that's what's important, to correct our relationship with fire and to redefine and get back to a better relationship with fire. So good fire in SLO County, you guys. This is happening. This is what we are doing. We're doing it. We have been working with San Luis Obispo and CAL FIRE in close partnership to bring fire with the city of SLO for vegetation management. We've been working together to uphold our traditional ecological knowledge and practices. And for a couple of years now, folks within our community and folks with the city have been working to bring this out as a part of the climate adaptation and safety element. So this summer, in fact, this summer in June, we are working on having our first good fire in open space within the city limits. This is going to be the first prescribed burn, controlled burn, intentional burn in San Luis Obispo City since the 60s. In the 1960s is about the time that communities stopped having burns. A lot of it has to do with the risk involved with having more population in the area and the restrictions that come with having population. But it's something that definitely needs to be addressed, and it needs to be managed. And we need to talk about what that looks like. And so here we're going to have our first fire in open space in city. It will be at the Johnson Ranch open space on the south side of our city limits. And for us, we are working to get rid of invasive species. You know, we have invasive grasses throughout there, but we also have a really great population of native grasses and native plant communities that we would like to see thrive, and we want to promote growth. And so we've been focusing on those regenerative native grasses. Here you can see we have some yarrow, we have a good healthy amount of the wavy leaf soap plant, we have some sticky monkey flowers, we have some blue-eyed grasses. The blue-eyed grasses have really, they're popping off over there. We have been meeting on site with oops, sorry, we have been meeting on site with the city of SLO, with the Ranger Service and the Cal Fire Department, SLO Cal Fire Department, prepping the lands, doing trimmings, talking about what our break areas are going to look like. And so this is something that we are very excited to do. This is something as a community that has traditionally always been stewards of this land that claims us, right? This land and this water, it claims us. We did not claim it. We were born to it, and it has its claim on us. And being stewards of a land as a landless tribe, um, we have limitations. We have limitations to access of land, to access of practicing protocols. And so we have not been able to have cultural fire in our own way because we are a landless tribe. Our lands were taken from us. We were forcefully removed from our lands onto the missions, and the lands were after that forcefully removed from us by being parsed out, and fences put up and rancheros established. And so this will be the first opportunity for our elders and our families to have this role with good fire again here. Um, it's something that's hard to explain in words what that looks like, what that feels like. But it's just the beginning, you guys. These are practices that we are hoping will grow within our community. Just doing this one time will not change anything. This is a practice that it takes continuous relationship, continual burns, continual monitoring, and a stewardship. And so we're really, really hoping and growing our relationship so that we can bring good fire and cultural fire back to our communities. One of the big differences with a prescribed burn and a cultural burn is the size of the fire and how that fire is managed. When we are doing a burn and when we are working with the ground, we want the nutrients of the fire of the plants to go back into the ground to promote growth for the next season. And so that means that we have to cultivate these nutrients back into the soil. We have to work that back in. And so it takes more hands, and it takes our hands in the ground. For prescribed burns, a lot of the times, Cal Fire, their goal is to have minimal disturbance to the soil, minimal disturbance to the ground. And so once a burn is done, the ashes that remain, maybe they get blown away, maybe they wash away. But those nutrients, they're most helpful going back into the ground, into the soil, and being worked into it. So that's a part of our process that looks different, is soil replenishment. And one of the things that we want to bring about with these, if we're talking about doing a smaller fire and actually working the ashes and into the soil, you can't do as big of a space as thousands of acres at a time. Inherently, we don't have the hands for that. Traditionally, we would never be doing that. And so having them smaller, more manageable, lower heat, it'll allow us to have more controlled within city limits to help mitigate some of the risks and some of those restrictions that we face right now without good fire. And so it's part of the process we're going through to have training with Cal Fire so that we're doing a cross training so that they can help train our tribe in Cal Fire ways, because we will be working together on it. It is not one or the other. It is prescribed burn with cultural fire, with cultural burn. There, any cultural burn will always be a prescribed fire, but a prescribed fire does not mean it is a cultural fire. And so we want to marry that together to make sure that as many prescribed fires, we can incorporate cultural fire into it. And we're hoping that that'll help within the confines of city limits more and help mitigate risk to households and to residential areas and to places that our community occupies. And so this is a new endeavor for us, 2024. We are bringing good fire back to our community, and we're excited for it. And we're excited for the community to learn from it and benefit from it and see how good fire makes a positive impact. And so just want to say thank you to everyone that is listening or will be listening. These are conversations that have been beginning for a couple of years, but they will be continuing on. And these are conversations and educational opportunities we hope to continue within our community. And so if anyone ever has any questions, we welcome people to reach out. And if we want to jump into a Q&A now, we can do that.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. That was an amazing presentation. I do have a couple questions here. I'm not sure if you can see them, so I'll read them out loud for you. Paula asks, is there collaboration with MDO with the burns going on there?
We have had conversations with state parks and specifically about MDO about fire and cultural burns. We do discuss things with them when they have done burns, but we have not had boots on the ground with them to actually do good fire or cultural burns within Montana de Oro. At this point, we've been more in consultation with them, but I wouldn't be taking that off the table for the future.
Awesome. Okay. And then we have Michael and Doreen asking, how long is a typical burn, such as one at Johnson Ranch?
So the Johnson Ranch burn, it will be a 1 day burn, is what we planned for. And with Johnson Ranch, we're doing this as a cross training program. So we're actually going to have a whole day of in the classroom training for CAL FIRE participants, as well as other government agencies and tribal members from our tribe and other tribes welcome as well. And so we'll have a day of in-class training and discussions. And then when we get out into Johnson Ranch for the actual field burn, that would be 1 day, is what we plan on. It'll take hours. It'll take most of the day for the entire process from beginning of end to making sure that everything is set up correctly, that the weather is in our favor. That's a difficult thing with trying to plan training, is it is very much at the whim of the weather. So we have dates in mind, but we have to be flexible with that. So as long as all of that is set up correctly, seeing it through to the end, and then making sure that it is fully out before leaving, it'll take a day. And for Johnson Ranch, it's not a very large fire when considering prescribed burns that CAL FIRE does. However, it is a large fire when we talk about the size of a cultural burn. And so what we're doing is having a prescribed fire and picking the sensitive parts that we would like to do the cultural burn within the imprint of the prescribed burn.
Wonderful. We have a couple of questions ahead, so I'm going to keep going here. Sally asks, having worked with CAL FIRE on prescribed burns along the DCPP lands, that is in order to accomplish a goal of regenerating native grasses. That is the best to burn before rain in the fall. Okay, looks like it might have just been a comment, but wonderful. Thank you, Sally. And then Susie, hey, hello, that's my grandmother. She asks, will CAL FIRE assist with the actual ash incorporation into the soil post-burn?
They would be willing to. It'll depend on, I guess, with our tribal involvement. Ideally, that'll primarily be tribal members that are doing that handwork with the soil amending.
Awesome. And then Beth asks, is there somewhere to get a schedule of the prescribed burns pending in a given area slow here?
I know with the prescribed burns, they have to give out notices to areas, residential areas that are within a vicinity of a prescribed burn. I do not know of a schedule of them. I know sometimes, and a lot of times with the prescribed burns, they can they get kind of confirmed very short notice because of weather. I know they just did a prescribed burn recently a couple of weeks ago, and they were pending on the rain and had to wait until about the day before to confirm if they were able to do the burn. But I would look at Cal Fire website. They do have information on prescribed burns, and if you see smoke in your area, kind of answers and stuff. So check out Cal Fire. The Air Pollution and Quality Control Board also puts out notices about burns coming up. So that would also be another spot, another resource to keep an eye out for.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelsey. So we have a couple comments. Outstanding presentation on good fire from Mona. And then Sheila says, thank you so much for this. I have learned a lot. I really appreciate it. I also learned so much. And then one last question from Ryan. How does the size and the acres of a typical cultural burn compare with a typical CAL FIRE controlled burn?
So with a typical controlled burn, it wouldn't even be an acre. Or I'm sorry, a typical cultural burn. It wouldn't even necessarily be an acre. Like with a controlled burn, we would be talking about maybe like a 50 by 50 area or smaller. And it really is dependent on the location you're doing a burn. It's the plant community and the habitat that's there that is going to define where your burn parameters are going to be, but also the sloping of it, and how many people you have. What is your crew size? So it would be typical to be nice to have like a 6-man crew within one unit. And so it varies, but typically a controlled fire would not be more than like a 50 by 50 area.
Okay, Kelsey. It looks like there's gonna be no more questions. Michael and Doreen say such an informative and professional presentation. Fascinating. Thank you, Kelsey. And everyone says thank you. Kudos to Kelsey Schaefer for her poise and clarity.
Thank you so much. This presentation was put together by Becca Lucas and myself, so definitely have to give props to Becca Lucas as well. She teaches on this topic at Cal Poly, and is very helpful, and she is our leader with fire and bringing fire back in San Luis Obispo. So, just so much gratitude and thanks to Becca and everything that she does as well, and building relationships and partners within our community. It's so important. And I just want to say thank you to everyone here. This is such an important topic, and we plan to have more conversations within a public realm like this about not just fire, but our water relationship. Will be one of the next conversations. It's such a big topic right now, and it goes hand in hand with fire. And this is such an important year for both of these things. I guess some last things. It's interesting because fire for us, culturally, traditionally, is a man's responsibility. A woman is responsible for water, and a man is responsible for managing the fire. Women collect the sticks and stuff for the cooking and everything, but as far as tending to the fire, creating the fire, that is meant to be a man's responsibility. And I say with culture, you have to go where that fire is, who has that fire. We are a tribal community that is revitalizing our culture and building our capacity back because we are a landless tribe. We are not federally recognized like the Santee Ynez Chumash Band, for example. And so our resources, we heavily rely on relationship building within our community. And that is so important to be kinship based for us. And so for us to be bringing fire back, and this is something that we just hope to see grow so much within the men in our community and the men outside and the women as well. It's traditional to be man, but at the same time, we have women that are putting this together, and it is for our men to take over, and it is so that we can grow in that way, and is Sometimes you just have to do and go where that fire is. And so it's so important for us. We can't wait. You know, the world will keep moving around us if we don't move on it. And so we feel it's so important. Right now is the right climate. Government and society is in a place where they are willing and want to include traditional knowledge and practices. And so it's something that it's happening, and we couldn't be happier about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelsey. We have one more comment. Thank you for doing cultural outreach to the public. Much needed and much appreciated. This will automatically end at 2, so I'm gonna tell everyone that we can log off. There is a survey at the end. Don't feel like you have to, but it does help the process for us and the speakers as well as you guys. Just a little bit of commentary on how we can make it easier for everyone. Thank you so much for coming, Kelsey, and thank you everyone for coming here. We really appreciate it and look forward to having more of the YTT tribal members coming to speak.
Thank you, Chrissy, and thank you so much for what your guys' organization does in outreach and education and bringing people together. It's very important. So thank you very much.
All right, bye-bye, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful Friday and weekend.
Ao Shimokini.